Hi, Gary Stearman. And with me, Bob Ulrich. We're back. We had a tremendous trip to Israel, and we learned a lot there. And Bob, I had my batteries recharged in a lot of ways. How about you?
Well, it was a pilgrimage, as you called it.
Yeah.
It really, truly was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. In fact, the biggest thing about the trip for me is it finally gave me perspective. You can look at maps, you can look at books, you can read, you can watch videos, but you can't really fully understand where Christ was during the time he was in Israel. And for the first time, I can see Gethsemane, I can see the Mount of Olives, I can see the Golden Gate, I can see the Temple Mount, I can see the City of David, I can see the Pool of Siloam. I know where everything is now for the first time in my life, and it gave me perspective on how things actually happened there in Jerusalem.
A little more on the pilgrimage aspects. Our flight from JFK to supposedly Tel Aviv turned into a flight from JFK to Amsterdam, where we sat an extra day waiting to join those who had already gathered at the Sea of Galilee. So we were, when we arrived, we were very, very tired. But it was a great place, and the next day we went out on the Sea of Galilee, and it was fascinating, and it was uplifting at the same time, because for me, the Sea of Galilee is a spiritual place where Jesus worked in so many different ways, including the synagogue at Capernaum, including the places we know he walked, including the places where he probably obtained many of his disciples, like Peter, James and John. These men all were fishermen. And so we started out our trip on the fishing motif, and we have a tremendous experience out on that boat.
We really did. In fact, the boat we were on is owned by a Messianic believer.
Yeah.
And hearing the national anthem, hearing Jewish music, hearing Christian music in the background playing, it was a really, really moving experience. You're going to get to see the whole thing on our Join Us in Jerusalem DVD here in just a couple of months. But all of us, I think, were really, it was a special moment. That's all I can say. Very, very emotional. Yeah. I wanted to say when we arrived in the Galilee, I had looked up on Google Earth the kibbutz zone hotel where we were staying. And my first reaction was it looked a little bit like the barracks in Munich in 1972. And when we got off the bus and I looked at the place, I thought, boy, pictures lie. I mean, it was an absolute beautiful hotel sitting on the Sea of Galilee, and we just had a marvelous time. In fact, I wish we could have spent a little more time in the Galilee region because it's drop-dead gorgeous.
It's really fascinating. It's a Jewish place, and yet the tours specifically point to Jesus. Everywhere you go, Jesus was here, he was doing this, he was in Capernaum. Of course, there was the Jesus boat, the boat that was sunk in the mud for 2,000 years, and they very carefully brought it up, dried it out. It's in a museum now. We saw that boat. Similar to the boat that Jesus went out on with the disciples. And the Sea of Galilee is rather large. It can be rather windy and stormy, and we got an idea of how a little boat like that might look in a storm. And
well, it couldn't have been a nicer day when we were there. The sun was shining. It was 72 degrees. And in fact, my reaction to you was, is this the place where the storm took place? I couldn't picture a storm on the Sea of Galilee on the day we had.
Yes, but others have. I mean, that place can turn in a moment to a stormy sea because of the way the mountains channel the wind across the northern part of the sea. And I understand from the old experts that you better watch because it can turn from very, very calm to very stormy in just a few minutes.
We were fortunate to be there the day before the Israeli elections. We actually, as we went into, through the Golan, and you could see Mount Hermon, snow-capped Mount Hermon, off in the distance. We're driving down the road when all of a sudden there's Israeli tanks. And there's an exercise there on the side of the road. And what's next to the tanks but a polling station where the Israeli soldiers were actually coming to vote. So right away our tour guide pulled over, and Avi Lipkin said to me later, Bob, this doesn't happen. This is unheard of.
It is.
That you could be this close to an Israeli tank. So the soldiers were actually taking pictures with us. we're watching people coming in and vote. For me, it was one of the highlights of the trip to be up close and personal.
They were voting out in the field. They had their Merkava tanks running, and we were, within a stone's throw of those tanks.
Absolutely.
Very impressive.
And then we went to Gamla, and Gamla pretty much turned my legs into rubber really quick. I wound up following quite a few people in much better shape than me down this mountain to a place where Titus actually was, where this land was conquered in the ancient past. And you literally setting on land that's thousands of years old, that you can document the things that happened there in the excavations.
And the buildings. It's amazing. Well, we don't have time to talk about every single place we went, but Bob, our tour guide, was a man who had done service in the IDF. I suspect was still eligible for being called up in time of war. Let's put it this way, a sturdy guy.
Oh, yeah.
He could walk up and down those hills like nobody's business. And he had founded a couple of cities, Jewish towns, so he knew something about managing people. But the thing that got me about him, we called him Kuti, that's his nickname. And Kuti, Bob, impressed me with one thing. He is like this on the land of Israel. He is dug in, he has a firm grip on the land, and he's not letting go. And he is, to me, the spirit of modern Israel.
National pride, beyond belief when you go over to Israel. In fact, the one thing that shocked me is all my life I've heard about what a tiny little country Israel is.
Yeah.
Well, you can drive from north to south, and it can take you a long time to get from north to south. And I was amazed at how much open land there was, fruits and vegetables. We went into the market in Jerusalem one day, and just blocks and blocks and blocks of vendors selling their wares and spices and dates and figs and peanuts and everything imaginable. It's a land, as the Bible says, flowing with milk and honey.
You know, I think for me, the highlight of the trip was something I didn't even expect to see. Gilgal. It's not Mount Argamon. There's a Mount Argamon, but we saw a territorial area called Argamon, and it is now believed that Joshua and the tribes encamped there right after they came into the land, and they built a large enclosure with a holy place right in the middle where they actually did sacrificing unto the Lord. So you have an encampment right in the middle of the encampment, in a beautiful piece of land, by the way. There is apparently the remains of an altar, but the whole thing is in the shape of a foot. And this, at first I thought, what's going on here? Why a foot? Well, our guides talked about Joshua chapter 1, verse 3. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you, as I said unto Moses. And it seems that Joshua built all of his encampments in the shape of a foot. And there are 5 of them they know about now. And the reason he did was because that foot-shaped piece of real estate represented the foot of God on the land, keeping his promise. That's astounding.
Well, we were literally blessed with a lecture from the professor who made this discovery, a 2-hour lecture that we had at the hotel. And I heard people say, it's the greatest lecture I've ever, it was the highlight of the trip for me.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating about it is the Temple Mount is also in the shape of a foot.
It is.
In fact, you look at it on a map, and the first thing you say is, it's a shoe.
Yeah.
Somebody's foot. And so I guess God had a presence there too, didn't he?
I guess. Well, there's so much more to talk about, so much that we saw, so much that we experienced. When I first went over, Bob, I was asking myself, why am I going on this trip? What does this really mean in terms of my work, my relationship with God, other people? And honestly, I really didn't know until about halfway through the trip. It suddenly occurred to me that I have a much stronger understanding of Israel in prophecy. The modern Israelis have a supernatural quality that you have to see to believe. They really and truly believe Scripture, not as we do. They don't necessarily study it literally, but they worship God, and they really take to heart His promise to bring them back into the land, in a very real way that you have to see to believe.
And you shared with me how much the land has changed in the 30 years since you were there last. All of the holy sites have been converted into national parks. You were actually inside the Dome of the Rock.
Hey, the first time you could walk right inside the Dome of the Rock. I spent maybe an hour or two there, closer to 2, and explored the whole thing. And there were 2 or 3 other people there. That was it. Today,
oh no.
Oh no.
In fact, it was really, I've got to tell you, it was an intimidating place to be.
Yeah.
When we walked up on the Temple Mount and started to walk around, the first thing I noticed was the actual Dome of the Rock. If you look at it straight on, there's a panel to the right. And our cameraman, Tyler Wood, took a close-up picture of this panel. And when I saw it up on our Facebook page later, I was in a state of shock. Now, you need to go look at it for yourself. Facebook.com/Prophecy Watchers is the address. But sitting right there on the Dome of the Rock is a panel with an image on it that you need to go look at, is all I'm going to tell you. Now, while I was up there, I started hearing an uproar, something going on. The Jews, of course, go out to the Western Wall to pray. Well, there was a group of about 50 or 60 Muslim girls, all with headscarves on. And as the Jews were entering the doorway to go out to the Western Wall, they started screaming. I mean, literally screaming. 50, 60, 70 of them. I don't know how many there were, but they're, of course, screaming, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And the Jews don't respond. And it got to the point where I started to wonder, am I in a bad place right here? Is there going to be violence out here this morning? But I wasn't. It's a normal occurrence that probably goes on there every day. You were talking about our guide a little bit earlier, and he was talking about what the Jewish people have to take up on their Temple Mount from the Muslim people. It is a fight. In fact, if I was left with one impression of Israel after I left, is it's a battle for survival, but in a different way than I expected. We were never really in any danger, although I did hear that they found a pipe bomb up at the cave of Machpelah, where we were just the day before, that they had to come in and have the bomb squad come in. We missed it by a day, thank goodness.
That's okay.
But we were never really felt like we were in any danger in Israel. It's a beautiful land. Beautiful. Mountains, valleys, flowers, fruits and vegetables, just so different than I expected.
It's almost like California in a lot of ways, but on the other hand, it's like the desert, depending on where you go. Down to Masada, for example, the Dead Sea. And we visited Qumran. We don't have time to really go into all that, but I want to leave you with one of my great impressions of what happened to me personally, and that is I watched our tour guide, Israeli military, city manager over there, a man who wants to see the Jews planted back in the land again, a very sharp guy. And I thought of Zechariah chapter 12, verse 5, when I saw him. And the governors of Judah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength in the Lord of hosts, their God. He really did believe in the Lord of hosts, his God. And I mean, he was quick to talk about it. And this phrase, the governors of Judah, refers to the military leaders of Judah.
The IDF.
The IDF, absolutely. And so reading it again, listen, just read the word IDF into this as I go through it. And the governors of Judah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength in the Lord of hosts, their God, in that day. I think that day has arrived, and we got a good sense of it.
Well, they have a presence over there everywhere you go. And, you know, we went so many places. We did so much hiking. In fact, my first day back was a trip to the chiropractor, a trip to the massage therapist, just to put me back in shape. We hiked to the top of Masada. We hiked to the top of Herod's palace or fortress, the Herodian, whatever you want to call it. We went to Nimrod's fortress. For me, that was one of the greatest experiences of my life. Being in a fortress up on top of the mountain with a stone spiral staircase carved into the rock that went down like 8 or 9 stories. And every story you would come out into a room and there would be an arched window where they would shoot arrows out of the windows. It was an absolute fortress, sitting once again in the shadow of Mount Hermon, bigger than life. I mean, bigger than anything I've ever seen. in an ancient, literally on an ancient battleground.
Well, this trip's going to affect our spiritual base, our method of analyzing Scripture, I think our entire way of looking at Bible prophecy. And the fascinating thing, Bob, is that we survived. My voice is not back to where it should be yet. My wife and I caught some kind of a traveling virus over there, so I apologize for my voice today. But I have to say this one thing, and that is, until you've actually seen the Jewish people tenaciously build in a land that is in many, many ways a hostile environment, but they have the most amazing faith. There's not a thought that they might be driven from the land, not the slightest hint. They're in it for the long haul, and you just have to see it to believe it.
They're in it to win it. There's no question about it.
Absolutely.
We spent 8 days over in Israel, and we took literally thousands of pictures, hundreds of videos. I've got stuff with my GoPro camera of the Western Wall, places that I've seen on YouTube, but to be there and to see it was really, truly remarkable. Tyler Wood has spent the last 2 days since we've been home literally cataloging every picture, every video, what's on it. We're producing a DVD, and I'm sure most of you have heard about this by now. We've called it Join Us in Jerusalem. It's available to you for a donation of any amount to the Prophecy Watchers. One DVD may not do the job. We may have to expand this into 2 or 3 volumes at some point in time, because there's so much to see in Israel, so many places to go. Lectures from Aaron Lipkin, which I have to tell you were powerful.
And we didn't even talk about the Temple Mount. There's a great controversy about the location of the temple. That's an ongoing discussion. Shall we just use that term, a polite discussion about where the temple really was? We're going to be talking about that, and we're going to bring some guest experts in here as soon as we can. But we were there on the Temple Mount and in the city of David, and there's nothing like it, Bob.
Gary, we were at the Garden Tomb.
We were.
We saw just about everything you could see. 8 jam-packed days of adventures and excitement and biblical history and just enlightenment in ways that I've just never experienced. Couldn't be more excited. In fact, I'm thinking to myself, maybe this is the last time we'll get to visit Jerusalem before a major, major war breaks out. We're watching history.
More about that later. We're out of time. It's been great visiting with you today. We're happy to be back. Got a lot more to share, so stay with us right here on The Prophecy Watchers. I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, we're watching. You keep watching too.